How good are the deals in Southampton?
So Portsmouth is where we have the deals.
Oh,
The
Portsmouth
deals
are
are
where
good.
the deals are. But you
The
came
deals are
from
good.
Southampton. And
I live in
so
Southampton.
you live there and just take the deals from Portsmouth? Or
Absolutely.
Do they like you over there?
Not really, because I'm a Portsmouth fan as well, and I live in Southampton. So yeah, I've got a meeting next week with the next Portsmouth player in Southampton.
Little
So
conflict of interest there.
I was
so
like, mate, you're allowed to go there. He's like, they don't recognise
But
me.
we are back for another episode of the Property by Kazy podcast. Each and every week we have a property professional come and talk to us about their specific niche or their area of property that we're working in. So if you're looking to further your education or your property knowledge, this is the channel to subscribe to. If you haven't already subscribed, do it right now. Now. Okay, you're done? Like the video as well, just while you're here. Might as well get out of the way. All done? Perfect. That means we get to introduce Alister. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you very much.
So you've come from Southampton, operate in Portsmouth,
Correct.
and today are conversating in London.
Yes.
Basically global.
Yes, pretty much international.
Good stuff. And for those that don't know you, what's your background in property?
So my background is, just before I got into property, I was in the police for 5.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
For a firearms officer for the last 3.5 of that. Realised it wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
Decided to start my own business. This was about 4 years ago. Started sort of doing social media and videography, that side of it. Started doing that within property quite quickly, and then started seeing the life it could give you, the money you make. I've always been interested in property and development and stuff in general. I think so many people are, but they think that you need like loads of money. When I retire, I'll invest in property, that side of it. Then once I learned that you don't need to, you can source properties. That was where I started sourcing rent-to-rents about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
After about a year of that, it was quite dull. Had a team making 100, 150 calls a day to agents. And it was okay, it's just deals would fall through sometimes. There's no development really in it, so it's very much just you sell the deal and you're done, you're on to the next one. And there's always that pressure to hit the next one. And I had pressure to make money at that stage because I just had a couple of kids quite quick, one after the other, left my job, so the missus left her job at the same time, so the pressure was on. And yeah, within 2 years from now, me and my now business partner Simon, we met. He had a development company, started looking around projects that he had, 1 or 2 of them were HMO in Portsmouth. The numbers looked really good, his work looked really good, and we sort of come together and decided to do this for investors. So I started with no pot of money of my own to invest. I think that's quite an important factor because I get messages every day of people who, how do I get into property with no money? And we'll touch on that later in terms of like content from other people regarding getting into property with no money. But it is actually possible from the way I've done it, which is as a service for investors, finding houses, turning them into HMOs. Typically we buy 3 beds, turn them into 6 or 7 bed HMOs. Really high end, all en suite, and we do that as a service for 35 grand per property per investor. At the moment we've got about 32 on the go, I think.
Nice. So if we take that back, and you spoke about a lot of really interesting stuff there that I'm sure people want to know about, so we take it back to early on starting in property. When you left your job, did you know at that point you wanted to get into property, or was it more I want to leave my job and then I want to find something?
It was that I wanted to leave my job. It was that basically me and the missus both took 6 months off work, went travelling. That was when the light bulb come on. When, like, I don't know, living in Bali or Thailand or whatever for £4 a day, thinking everyone here seems a lot happier than the people at home, and not just like expats, the people who live there, from a much simpler life. And up until that point, I hadn't been on loads of holidays as a kid and stuff, so hadn't been out the country for a long time, and it's only then when you change that perspective. And it was that, like, 100% I want to be a business owner. I'd been watching a load of Gary Vee content at the time. Didn't know why it was resonated with me, just watched it for fun, and then it just gave me loads of inspiration, and that was 100% the sort of thing that pushed me in the first place.
That was that catalyst for you
100%.
taking a big step. So you first got into property, how did you get your education in terms of how did you learn the skills to kind of take your first steps into property?
So in terms of skills that you need to source the rent-to-rents, the main thing is going to be your honesty and integrity. So making sure you keep a golden reputation is absolutely key, because if you're building a personal brand within Facebook groups and things, that's going to be where the main part of your investors comes from. And if one deal out of 100 goes bad, they could post about it, other people will jump on it, and it'll ruin your whole name. So that's super important. And then also being able to close investors on deals. So it's essentially sales, but rather than finding a deal, sending it to an investor, maybe you've got them on your email list. I've never done email lists, because no one's going to just receive an email and just be like, yeah, I'm going to buy it. It needs to be phone calls, WhatsApp, Facebook messages, whatever. So getting that investor to a point where they're perfectly ready to buy before you found the deal is so important. So what area they want, what the rent needs to be, how many bedrooms it needs to be, house or flat, whatever it is, because then once you present that to them and it matches all of that, then there's no reason why they shouldn't buy. That's the two most important things, I think.
Yes, I think definitely, I think integrity, like in business as a whole, particularly when you're giving somebody a deal or telling them this is going to make money, you've got to do it, like you said, they're relying on you to a degree. I think the other side is that they do need to be accountable, that, you are supposed to do your own due diligence. Like if you're out there looking for deals and you're not doing your own due diligence, you're setting yourself up to buy a rubbish deal from somebody.
100%.
And particularly if you do that in volume, if you have more money than sense, it can snowball and become really dangerous. And then obviously lastly, that pre-qualification element, I think particularly in a market like it is now, the property market, but the rent-to-rent market as it's been for so long, like the lower the ticket prices, the lower the barrier to entry, the more the competition is. And when you're looking at something that's got £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, it's a more attainable sum of money for a lot of people, so it means there's going to be more competition. So I think you're very right in that people have to be able to move quickly. But you said to a degree, through maybe some deals falling through and things not maybe transpiring the way you initially envisaged, that you sort of fell out of love, so to speak, slightly with the rent-to-rent element of the business. Is it something that you just wound down completely? How did you exit it?
So that's a good question, because it was hard to jump from that, and I had a couple of staff and stuff, to what we're doing now, where we've got a couple of people who work with us, but generally we don't need staff at the moment. It was very much a case of changing my focus 100% from one to the next. And that's no easy task. And because when I first left the police, I didn't have a mentor, didn't know what I was doing, was just plugging away, trying to do business on my own, which is mental now when I look back, but I didn't really have a choice at the time, just needed to make it work or I was buggered. So, but everything I did before that on my own was a lack of focus, because when you're trying to make something work, what you actually have to do is 100% focus on that thing and nothing else, because that's the only way it's going to work. But I was doing like a bit of social media and property at the same time, like a social media agency.
And videography.
Yeah, so the videography was with that, and then like I'll outsource that, but then you earn money doing one thing, like maybe you source a property and it's a bit of chance, so then you go into that for a bit, but then you leave the other one behind. And actually, if you just focus 100% on running a social media agency, sourcing properties, whatever it is, that's the key, and that's what I had to do when we got into just doing the HMOs, and then it just scaled up massively from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, you met your now business partner who ran an existing development company doing more conventional flips, some conversions, HMO conversions, but you realised there was an opportunity based on your skill set you developed through the rent-to-rent sorting business, liaising with investors, that could be coupled with his experience in development to bring investors to scale up between the both of you. And I think that's one thing that people often miss when it comes to personal and property and getting into property as a whole, that something that maybe isn't your long-term goal can be a means to an end in allowing you to either raise capital, build relationships, or raise your personal level of understanding or education or skill set. Because if you hadn't done the rent-to-rent sourcing, you wouldn't have been as confident in liaising with investors. So I think it's often sort of chicken and egg, and some people, we see the Instagram world of this person developed this, they're doing a new build of X, Y, and Z, or that we don't want to rush, and some people are the opposite. They go and see somebody that's doing a big conversion and think, I don't know how I would get there, but there's always steps and a means to an end. So what did your first, when you had the conversation, you decided that, look, we're going to go for this as a business, what did your first deal look like?
So the first deal was 3-bed house, which is typical for us. 195 grand purchase, end value 580. Pretty ridiculous numbers.
That was as a seven bed,
all
all ensuite HMO. Yeah. And what sort of scope of works are you looking at there?
So we do everything from start to finish. So everything's back to brick, loft conversion with 2 double ensuite rooms in the loft. On the middle floor you've got 3 ensuite rooms. Ground floor you've got 2 ensuite rooms where, like in the kind of houses like Victorian style houses where there's 2 reception rooms and then like kitchen at the back usually. We just extend 3 metres out the back. It's all under permitted development, so that's a good part. To make 7 ensuite rooms that are all sort of 10 square metres or more. So that's the guidelines in Portsmouth where we operate anyway, but it's not the same everywhere. And that, even if it's not the guidelines and they could be smaller, I think that's a decent sized room anyway, where you're not going to have voids, you're going to have decent tenants. And it's just a nicer way for people to live. We have massive communal areas, roof lanterns in the communal areas and stuff, open plan kitchen, lounge area. So like that's what people want now, really fresh. The design of all of them are different because it's based on the investor and what they want to do it like. So some are just white and grey everywhere, others a bit more crazy. But for the investor, they pay us 35 grand. They make probably 150 to 200 grand profit, often getting all of their money out of the deal.
Okay, so a deal like that, what sort of capital for an investor is required to do a deal like obviously it changes between properties, but you've got your say loft conversion with an outrigger, rear extension 3 meters depending on size of the property, and then the complete conversion and back to brick and full refurb. What sort of is your ballpark costing for something like that where you're operating?
At the moment, we do all of them the same price because there might be one we make a little bit more money on and one that we make none on because there's not a massive amount of profit within the build because we're doing everything within the same business. So we're not fussed about making 40, 50 grand from the build like a normal builder would because we're making money and building the relationship with the investor to do 3, 4, 5 properties, sometimes all at the same time. So let's say if we bought it like 250, build is 150 plus 5% that, so 157.5. That's across the board now.
That's sort of your standardised conversion. In terms of how your investors in the first place are sourcing and buying these properties, what sort of, are they cash buyers? Who are you generally operating with?
So that's the thing, in terms of cash actually required, some do it cash, the majority do it on bridging. So what we found is, including our fee, including furniture, including everything else, you need sort of 180-ish. We always say, we don't like working with people with less than 180, even though you probably could, so say 150. But it's property, things can go wrong, things can cost more, there can be delays. So we don't want people to be stressed during the process. And we're really lucky with the investors. I say luck, it's not really luck because we pick and choose the investors. We've had to turn a couple down just because the relationship wasn't going to work, sort of thing, and that's an awkward conversation in itself. But obviously we get investors a lot of the time who want to do it but don't have enough, and that's an easy conversation to have. But with 180 to 200 grand, you've got enough, you've got a cushion there if there's extra damp work or something like that. So about 200, and then the property's worth sort of 550 to 600 at the end. And
generally, have you managed to build like relationships with lenders for your exits in terms of sort of standardising it, or is it just sort of very rate and product dependent?
In terms of the exit, so the HMO commercial mortgage, because 7-bed, that varies dependent on who can offer the best and rates. But in terms of bridging, built good relationships there,
Nice, because I think that's what it's really about, like collectively across the board. If you can build a great relationship with effectively what you would class as indirectly your supplier, so your supplier of the funding, your supplier of the exit, then you can be more confident for your investor that, look, they can't give you a guaranteed exit number now, but based on standard of finish, X, Y, Z, it's likely to achieve this amount.
This is the thing, we need planning in Portsmouth. So when it comes to the bridging, they hold back a bit, obviously, until you get planning. So we're taking a 3-bed C3 dwelling to a C4 HMO up to 6, but then we need a second planning app to go to 7. So there's 2 planning apps involved. The main one is obviously the first one, because you still had...
Because you've got Article 4 in Portsmouth,
we've got Article 4
right?
across the whole of Portsmouth, and it's the same Southampton, obviously a lot of London. So that means
for those
that
that don't know, maybe actually, I was thinking, do you want to explain to them what Article 4 means?
So Article 4 is a European directive where basically councils put it in place which take away the permitted development rights for people to turn houses into HMOs. It often happens in cities where there's a university, because like in Portsmouth you can have up to 10% of the houses can be HMOs. In the area that we operate, it's probably 0 to 4% a lot of time when we buy, and we don't get close to that 10%, we still want to risk it. But if you go to the university before Article 4 come into place, there's like 80% HMOs on some of the roads, because it basically just means that you've got little ghettos of students just having street parties, and that's what they want to avoid.
So it's just all about managing. A lot of the time Article 4 is looking at what the development plan is and the planning plan is within a specific area and what they're trying to achieve. Like, do they have an undersupply of first-time buyer dwellings? They have an undersupply of family dwellings, or like HMO accommodation. So I've kind of spoken about the numbers in terms of the costs involved for an investor wanting to engage with you, along with the costs involved of what you charge, what the build is, what the relevant deposit is if you were going to buy it. So they generally buy it. What sort of percentage in terms of LTV when they're getting their initial bridge?
So it's a bit more complex just because it's Article 4, so they don't want to lend as much. But if it wasn't, they could lend 75% of the purchase and 100% of the build, as long as it doesn't exceed 75% of the GDV. But at the moment, people have to put in roughly, I think the last one was 34% of the purchase price, and everything else was funded.
Okay.
So 34% of 250k.
Okay, nice. And how have you found the planning in general, like, and working with that? You hear it often on, in property, like your power team, in terms of, do you always engage with the same architectural firm for planning? And how have you found that process?
That's been good. Getting a good architect in this game is so important, and he's got a really good relationship with the council. Doesn't mean that we can just get it through easily or anything. Their guidelines are like 8 to 12 weeks for a planning app. Last one come back in 13. It's fine. Something that happens is it can go to committee if a lot of people kick off about the fact it's going to be a HMO. So it doesn't happen very often, because what we do to alleviate that is go to the neighbours. We've got brochures that sort of explain what we do. It's better that we're doing a HMO than anyone else in the area, because the standard, the finish, the type of tenants we're going to have. Because even people who know nothing about property see on the news about HMOs and everyone beating each other up in HMOs.
I think, there's definitely, a stigma of, as a whole, from a landlord perspective, there's a stigma of the bad landlord, even more so when it relates to HMOs.
100%.
But I think, like with anything, it's all about looking at, like for me, like when I look at stuff, just always go back to basics, and like back to basics when it comes to like education, like basic SWOT analysis. Like if there is, a threat, which is potential objections, that's also an opportunity to say, well, actually, we can do it better. And if you've got a track record of creating like really nice homes, the reality is that if you look at, like you spoke about leaving the police, like a starting salary, like in London, if you're in the police, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, around sort of 25 to 28k. Like, and now for a 1-bedroom flat in London is on average 1,100 plus council tax, that's £200 plus gas, which is probably £1 million with everything going on at the moment, and electricity, water, etc. It quickly adds up and becomes unaffordable. So, you like you said, you got HMOs, and that was gonna be my next question. Do you rent to professionals? Do you rent to students? Like, what's the sort of the mixture? And
so we're not against renting to students at all. It's just purely where we are in Portsmouth. First of all, you can't buy any houses to turn into HMOs in those areas, and that's the same across so many cities. But the other thing is the houses in that area are very small compared to the ones we buy. So you could buy a really bad 4-bed unoptimised HMO and turn it into a nice 6-bed. They're quite hard to find though. So if we were doing 3 or 4 deals a year, that'd be fine. but we'll probably be doing 50 odd this year.
Mm-hmm.
Where we buy, the houses are bigger, bay and forecourt, or double bay and forecourt, big properties that we can. It's like a TARDIS. From the outside, it doesn't look that big, and then it's enormous inside. Once we extend it and develop it, obviously. In terms of what you say about the bills, that's exactly where we're operating. We're operating for people who want to live in a HMO because the lack of hassle. They might travel with work. They work from home a lot. They don't want to live on their own. So the social aspect, some people call it co-living. It's basically a nice HMO. For people who would, like, we get people come down from being in a one-bed flat on their own, and for that they'll save £400 a month at least. So most people are either living in Portsmouth for a short period of time, postgraduates, things like that, and they'll buy elsewhere, but they are going to buy a house at some point. And they're coming up from worse HMOs to a better HMO. So therefore we can get a lot of the market that are from a flat to ours, from a bad HMO to ours, and then people who are moving in to the area.
Nice. That sounds like a good model that obviously works well for you, works well for the investor, because from my understanding, you obviously not only deliver so you basically source the property, deliver the refurb, and then manage the asset going forward.
Yeah.
So effectively what it does is it can convert what can be quite an uncertain investment in an asset into a sort of more standardized investment vehicle with a sort of pretty much fixed return, or a more standardized return over a long period of time, which I think is something, there's loads of people that are looking for different things in property, but the ability to own an asset to potentially benefit from the capital appreciation if things go in the right way, I think is a really good opportunity. It's a lot of good stuff we've spoken about. So let's talk briefly about some of the some stuff that's going on in the market that's causing more issues. So how, as a HMO operator who has one of the higher utility payments, what do you think, what have you done to maybe combat that, or how do you think that's going to affect your business going forward? So
firstly, with the amount of cash flow people are getting, like this house that we'd be buying would rent as a buy-to-let of 1,200 quid. Now we're getting like £4,500 for the same property. Yes, they got to develop it, but also within developing it, they'll probably end up with less tied up than they would if they'd just bought it as a buy-to-let anyway. So they're leaving less money in and getting 4 or 5 times the return. So that's one aspect. So that means if you end up with a free house and your cash flow is £2,200, and now you've got to pay more bills and it's £1,900, you're not fuming. It's infinite returns anyway. However, something we're doing to combat that is individual meters outside the bedrooms for electric. So they can see and we can see what they're using, and we'll put it within the ASTs, the contracts, that there's a set amount, say £50 a room or whatever. A lot of people working from home, gaming, probably Bitcoin mining in one of our HMO rooms and rinsing it. So
it is. You see crazy stuff. Like I saw somebody charging their car outside one of my HMOs the other day. And I had a look here and I said, they were trying to explain to me that it's not that expensive, and I thought to myself, you might be right. I don't know that much about this, but you're charging your car. Like, do I get to drive it? But I think and that's where sort of systemization comes into place as well in terms of management. Like, so you mentioned potentially introducing a system that would allow you to mitigate your risk when it comes to bills and things like that, which is important for you. It's important for the other tenants that are maybe being a lot more frugal with the way they use it.
And we don't want to mug them off when the other people are using more. So we don't just want to charge a blanket over everyone. Another thing is solar panels. That's basically the 2 main things that we're going to be doing on every HMO going forwards.
Nice. And then in regards to sort of supply and demand, so you're saying you're really looking to scale. You said you want to do, you say you want to do 35 deals this year?
So we've got about 30 going on now, which are all in Portsmouth. But the way we're scaling going forward is we'll continue doing Portsmouth, still a really, really strong demand. One of our investors actually went to do some due diligence before he invested, called every agent in the area and asked, like, what's HMO market like, and every single one said there's a massive undersupply for professionals in these certain areas of Portsmouth. So that was great for us to hear, because it's good for us to tell them, but they got reassurance from
bit
every
of free
agent.
market research
so
for
it's
you
awesome.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes from a place of knowing anyway, but to be reassured 100%. We're conscious with this model, we can't just go on forever. However, there's we could start just turning existing HMOs into optimised HMOs.
Mhm.
The numbers would still be really good, and we don't have to go through planning if we do that. But also, under our mentorship at the moment, we're teaching people how to do what we do, how to source the right properties for conversion, how to identify the right area, how to identify demand, how to get a build team together, architect, solicitor, mortgage advisor, everything like that, to build their own power team to go and offer this to investors for themselves. That's the education arm of the business, and the way that we're looking to scale is to do that via our mentees. So a few of them are builders. We've already got like 4 of the mentees partnering up together, where one will be the builder and one will attract investors, which is very similar to what me and Simon do now. The way that we can scale that is we can bring in the investor, or we can identify a property in one of their areas, and at the moment there's like 4 areas that we're looking to operate. Because
I like the way you just mentioned the 4 areas, where keeping it.
I'll tell everyone.
Is it pressure? Is it James? He's about to tell us the 4 areas to invest in HMOs.
To be fair, it's mainly because they're non-Article 4, because if we're looking to scale this and deal with people who want to invest 100 million, they're not going to invest where you need planning, because they don't want any of that hassle or risk. So areas, Watford, a couple areas at Essex, Hayes, I believe, non-Article 4. We're looking at Worcester as an Article 4 area where we can optimise a lot of properties. There's massive demand there.
So quite a lot of stuff.
And Reading.
It's quite a lot of stuff sort of commuter belt or just outside commuter belt.
Good capital
sort of
appreciation,
M25.
good economy, good rentals.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of sort of the Hayes, Ruislip, Uxbridge, going up towards Watford Way, and like you said, so a lot of those sort of areas can definitely, you can see one from the investment infrastructures going into them to create the links to London, to be able to get into London in sort of half an hour, 35 minutes, is always really good to marry that capital appreciation with the benefit of the increased yield from it being a HMO.
100%, and we don't do it purely for the cash flow, obviously, but the thing is, with all of these areas, the numbers aren't going to stack as good as they do in Portsmouth. Yeah. But if they did, every man and his dog would be investing there in HMOs, because it would be unbelievable, because you wouldn't need planning, whereas we need planning. Our investors are happy to take that small risk, because ultimately it takes another month or 2 to get all over the line, and then they end up leaving very little money in the property that's worthwhile.
Talking of leaving little money in the property, sorry, a lot would be bad, a little's good. You touched on briefly, obviously, getting your commercial valuation. Yeah. Particularly, all of yours always 7 beds, or like 7 or above, or do you do some 6 beds as well?
So generally, the main goal is to get to 7 bed, purely for that commercial valuation. So as a 6 bed, one of these properties will go from, say, 260 purchase to 460 to 480 bricks and mortar on a 6 bed. Some people argue, if you're going commercial valuation, then you're really getting as much as you possibly can. I think that's great, because if you're leaving no money in, then who cares after that?
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked is because I think one of the main things when it comes to these HMO deals, and the deal itself hinges on your end value, but a lot of the time with surveyors, some of them have different aspects, and like I said, different people have different policies or different requirements, but a lot of it can almost be individual led. So I was asking, effectively, with these commercial valuations as opposed to bricks and mortar, are you still, for like delivering a high-end product as a 6 bed all-en-suite HMO, are you finding you're still able to get that slight premium as a commercial valuation, or they're giving you the top end of bricks and mortar?
So we generally haven't got 6 beds. We've done 1, and that guy sold it, so we don't know what the valuation would have been. He's got like 100 buy-to-lets. He just did 1 HMO and then sold it. We generally don't go for commercial valuations. If it was going to be a 6 bed, I probably wouldn't bother. However, I know that you can. There's a couple of lenders I know of that do that. But I mean, you sort of say, like, would it hinge on that 7th bed in order to make it a good deal? No, and that's, I think, the benefit. 6 bed is still a really good investment, really good return on your money, going from 260 to 460. You spent 150, so compared to areas like we spoke about, like on the outskirts of London and things, the areas are going to be worse than that.
I was just thinking, like, numbers wise, if for example you said you're pushing from 460 to 550 with an extra room, the cost of the room, even if that room was one room because of the rear extension and you attributed £35,000 to that, it still means that return on investment is amazing if you get that commercial valuation. And I just wondered, like, in London a lot of the time, fortunately, sort of bricks and mortar valuations, which, sorry, for those that maybe are not familiar, is like the actual value as a house worth what it is as a house. The commercial valuation is, it's difficult, but it's effectively based on how well it yields as a commercial entity.
As a business, basically. That house there makes X amount per year, therefore we're going to value it at.
But it is, and it's like, it's a really good way to get, you know, justification in terms of, if you've got a house that you alluded to is making a gross of 4,500 because of the conversion to a C4 HMO, as opposed to making 1,100 on the open market, it's a massive uplift. But it's just being able to make sure that on the back end you also get that return on the increased valuation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we obviously explain planning and everything to all our investors, make sure they're 100% happy, they sign terms that say we've explained everything planning wise to you, and at the end of the day getting the 6-bed all en-suite out of it, the cash flow is going to be exceptional for what you pay for the property, and also you're not going to be leaving a massive amount in, still probably the same as if you would have just bought it as a buy-to-let in the first place, like 75, 80k.
That's good. I think so. For those, you know, if you're looking for a more passive investment, you know, you're looking for something that's going to be managed, something that has the potential for significant uplift in value and a good monthly return on investment. The details, what's the company called?
So it's called Ivy Wealth Creation.
Ivy?
Ivy.
Like the drip. Like the drip. Okay, so Ivy Wealth Creation is going to be in the link below, so you can reach out to those guys and obviously see if, you know, you guys can work together. Pause. Stop. Sorry, quick intermission. As we have no sponsors, you're the sponsor right now, so subscribe to this video if you're enjoying it. Also, if you haven't already, like, comment, all that good stuff. Now, back to the video.
Thanks very much for that. So yeah, we work for investors doing these projects. We also do them as joint ventures where we do the work, the investor puts in the money, and also we have investors lending us money so that we can do these projects and just pay them a fixed return. And on the side of that, we offer the education side, which is a 12-month mentorship program at the moment with weekly in-person or Zoom meetings teaching people how to do what we do. So the main concept of that is, because I get so many messages saying, I've got some money but not enough to do anything properly within property, or people have got enough to do like a 1-bed flat, for example, I just say it's not really worth it. If you build a business within property, you can make, well, even if you charge 25 grand for these, if you do 40 in a year as £1 million profit, it's going to take a considerably long time to make £1 million by investing in property. So the education side and the lending side.
It's interesting. And obviously, as I mentioned, the link's going to be below. Soon as, you know, one of you sign up, as she's confirmed, I'm going to get the best deal on the table. So I need someone to sign up so I can go over to Southampton or to Bournemouth and get myself one of these. All your money out, cash flow me, couple of grand a month deals so I can go on holiday and go back to see Alistair in Dubai again. This has been a really great episode, but before we go, or before I let you go, I'm going to ask the question I ask everybody that comes on, which is the most common question I get asked, and it is, a young person or maybe somebody with no experience in property, but I know I really want to get into property. What advice would you have for that person?
100% is you just got to invest in your education and your network. So people say that they haven't got money to invest in things, but if you're working a job and you can tuck away £100 to £200 a month to just go to networking events, just build up that network and just keep getting your knowledge, consuming everything on YouTube, that's going to get you to where you want to be. And without knowledge, nothing's going to happen. That's it.
Well, that's a quote from somewhere, not like with knowledge and power and something. I feel like
knowledge is power, literally.
I feel like, oh no, I was thinking of Spider-Man. We're great. I was thinking of the other one. So yeah, I got that wrong. But no, I think that is really, really good advice. If you want to get into property and, you know, you've got the money to go to a networking event or to do a little bit of education or to just take your time, because there's loads of free information out there as well on YouTube, on Instagram, on even on TikTok now. You'll be learning stuff in 45 seconds. So there is great information out there. So definitely work out what you don't know and then fill in the gaps. This has been another really good episode. Thank you for coming on and joining us today. Your details will be in the description below. If people want to find you and network with you directly, where can they find you? Because remember, some people are listening to this and they're not watching it. So where can they find you?
So Instagram's the main place, probably. I'm on TikTok and YouTube as well.
Give us those spellings in case they're listening.
Right, it's Alistair Farker, so it's Alastair _Farker, FARQUHAR.
There's going to be a couple of playbacks to that to get that right. Obviously, you could drop them a DM and engage and interact, because that's what it's all about. It's about building a winning property community, and the cornerstone of that is going to be this Property by Kazy podcast. Tune in next week to find our next very, very special guest.